Riven Calloway squeezed the rope until her knuckles burned as the bull charged the fence. Wood shuddered, dust leapt, and the animal's horns slashed the air exactly where her late husband's chest had been the day he died. She knew that wasn't true. Hoyt had died miles away on another ranch, another shoot, but her mind replayed the scene anyway, layering every snort and stomp with the memory of a coffin lowered into dry earth. Now the same neighbors who'd watched her tower over that grave were watching from the lane, waiting to see if the giant widow would break again. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The bull struck the boards once more and backed off, flanks heaving, eyes white with rage. Riven forced herself to breathe with him, counting the rise and fall of that massive chest the way Hoyt had tried to teach her years ago. Slow the animal, he'd said, and you'll slow yourself. Her chest wasn't listening. It fluttered like a trapped swallow beneath her plain work shirt, every breath shallow, tight, useless. The rope creaked in her hands. She realized only then that her fingers were trembling. You keep holding it that high, he'll take your whole arm next time. The voice came from behind her, low and steady, carrying through the dust and the murmurs like a line tossed across a river. Riven stiffened. She didn't need to turn to know whose voice it was. Half the territory knew that voice. Deacon Holt, rich rancher. Railroad man. The kind of name that made bank managers straighten their vests and saloon doors swing a little easier. Riven lifted her chin before she faced him. The move was habit now stretched tall. Steal up, act like it didn't matter that she had to angle her head down to meet most men's eyes. Standing this close, she saw that Deacon was one of the few who didn't need craning. He was tall enough to hold her gaze level, and that irked her more than it should have. "Works fine enough for me," she said, shifting the rope lower anyway. "He's in one piece. I'm in one piece. That's a good morning on any ranch." Deacon's mouth tipped, not quite into a smile. For now, he was cleaner than any man had a right to be. This far out, dark vest unwrinkled, white shirt too crisp for honest work, black hat without a sweat stain in sight. His boots, though, were scuffed at the toes and dusted with trail grit. Riven caught that detail and held onto it, because it was easier than looking straight into the pale gray of his eyes. She hated gray eyes. They showed too much without giving anything back. The bull snorted again, pacing the pen, muscle rolling under hide like coiled thunder. Hoyt would have said something easy now, she thought. Something about how a man and a bull weren't so different once you got close enough to smell the fear on them. Hoyt wasn't here. Just the bull, the rope, and Deacon Holt with his money and his careful voice. Riven swallowed. "If you came to buy beef, you'll have to take it alive. I don't open the gate when he's in this mood. I didn't come for beef." Deacon scanned the pen. The yard beyond, then her weathered barn, as if tallying each board in his head. "I came for you, Widow Calloway." Her spine locked at the title. She heard a few of the neighbors stop pretending not to watch. Leather creaked as someone shifted in a saddle at the lane. The word widow had a way of rolling through people like a stray tumbleweed, harmless, but everyone's eyes followed it. "I'm busy," Riven said. "Bull doesn't feed himself." Deacon stepped closer to the fence, into the shadow of her size without a flinch. Up close she could see a day's worth of shave already threatening his jawline. A faint line near his mouth that said he smiled often enough to earn it, but not often enough for it to soften him. "You're holding that rope like you expect the world to yank it away," he said quietly. "Mind if I?" He held out a hand, big, brown, calloused. Not a banker's hand. Riven hesitated. Pride warred with common sense. Pride usually won in her life. Pride was why she still had the ranch this long after Hoyt died, even with the bank nipping at her heels. Today, common sense scraped out a victory. She passed him the rope. Deacon didn't grab it hard like most men did when they wanted to show an animal who was boss. He let it slide through his palm, feeling the weight, the pull. The bull tossed its head, testing the give. Deacon anchored his boots, shoulders easy, arm fluid instead of rigid. Riven watched his posture shift the way she'd once watched her husband's hands on a broth measuring. Adjusting, never forcing. "You mind if I talk to him a minute?" Deacon asked. The question caught her off guard. He ain't much for conversation. Most folks just don't listen long enough to hear the answer. He tipped his chin toward the pen. "Open it a crack. You want to die before noon. That's your business," she muttered, but she slid back the latch anyway. The gate squeaked open a hand's width. The bull charged immediately, all fury and weight and bellow. Riven's heart lurched to her throat. Deacon didn't step back. He didn't jerk the rope. He simply turned, just enough to angle his body sideways, leading the bull's momentum in a slow arc instead of a straight collision. "Easy, big fella," he murmured. The words were simple, but the tone slid under Riven's skin like warm whiskey. "You're too big to be aiming that strength at fences." The bull slowed, nostrils flaring, sides heaving. Riven stared. Deacon's shoulder muscles flexed under his vest, but he wasn't straining. He was listening. She could see it in the tilt of his head, the way his jaw unclenched as the animal's breathing steadied. He'd done this before, a lot. Deacon braced one boot against the lower board and leaned closer to the bull, still speaking in that low, coaxing rumble. "That pen's beneath you, boy. Matter of time before you figure out you can go where you like." The bull blew hot air in his direction, then shockingly stilled. Riven found herself exhaling. "You charm all your problems that way?" He tossed her a brief glance. "Most problems don't weigh 1,200 pounds. Some feel like they do," she muttered. His gaze sharpened, as if he heard the words beneath the words. "That's why I'm here," she bristled. "If this is about the bank, I'm not selling." "It's about the bank," he said calmly, "and about you not selling." That hit harder than any charge from the bull. He eased the rope back toward her, letting her feel the weight again before he fully released it. "Walk him to the trough," he said. "Slow, like you're teaching a child not to run by a cliff. You grip with your legs when you're riding, Widow Calloway. Same goes for your feet now. Figure your balance, and he'll feel it." "I'm not riding," she snapped, the words out before she could stop them. Deacon's brows rose. Who said anything about riding? The world tilted. Riven swallowed hard. Nobody has to. He didn't press. He simply watched her, letting the silence stretch until she either filled it or walked away. Riven hated that kind of silence. Her height, her size, her very existence already filled too many rooms without her words adding more. "I walk him," she muttered, tightening her grip. "That's it. Then walk him," Deacon said. "We'll talk while you do." She clicked her tongue the way Hoyt used to and tugged gently. The bull resisted, then relented, hooves thudding against the packed earth. Riven moved one steady step at a time, feeling the rope bite into her palms, feeling Deacon's presence beside her like a second sun. "The bank sent you," she said after a few strides, because if she didn't name the fear, it would eat her alive. Or you got when they were sniffing it. Either way, you're here to pick over a carcass. "Funny thing about carcasses," Deacon replied. "You don't usually see them walking bulls before breakfast." "I'm 2 payments behind," she said flatly. "They'll call the note soon." "You wait like a vulture, Mr. Holt. Or do they send a telegram when they're done sharpening the knife?" "They send a ledger," he said. "I do my own math." She shot him a look. "How kind. Some would call it that once they hear the rest." He adjusted his hat, eyes on the bull instead of her. "Call me Deacon. I'm not here to take your land, Riven. I'm here to keep Harlan Pike from getting it." The name made her jaw lock. Harlan Pike, neighbor to the north. Owns 3 times the acreage, half the town's fear, and none of its respect. The man had been measuring her fence lines with his eyes since Hoyt's funeral. "He wants my spring," Riven said. "He wants your spring, your grazing rights, and the prestige of slapping his brand over the only patch of land in 3 counties stubborn enough to tell him no," Deacon said. You say that like it's a small thing. Riven led the bull around a drift of hay, keeping the animal's shoulder just shy of her hip. She could feel the heat of its body, the latent violence in every step. What do you care who gets it? Because the railroad cares, Deacon said simply. And I run the largest line of beef into that railroad from here to the border. I don't like Pike close to my water, my stock, or my men. He paused. And I don't like watching good land torn from a woman who's already buried more than a husband. Her throat tightened. You don't know what I've buried. I know grief, he said softly. Something flickered across his face then. Quick, like sunlight off a knife blade. But Riven caught it. She wondered who he'd lost. Wife? Child? Brother on some distant trail? She forced her attention back to the bull. One step, then another. So what's your plan, Deacon Holt? Simple. He walked in easy rhythm with her, matching his stride to hers. You keep the land. I lease grazing on your north pasture for my prime steers. I pay your arrears at the bank and guarantee the note for the next 3 years. Her stomach dropped. And what do you get besides grass? A foothold between my spread and Pike's, he said. A place to winter cattle that isn't my overcrowded valley. And his eyes slanted to her. A partner who isn't afraid of hard work. I'm not afraid of work, she said. I'm afraid of men with smooth plans. I'm not smooth, he said dryly. I'm practical. Practical says you buy me out, she shot back. Not tie yourself to a widow barely keeping a roof over her head. Practical says I invest in people who don't scare easy, Deacon countered. You kept this place running a full year after burying your husband. You broke your own back instead of selling his brand at auction. A woman who walks her own bull doesn't scare. She almost laughed, the sound harsh. You didn't see me last winter. I saw your smoke, he said, and I saw it this morning. Bankers see ledgers. Men like Pike see fences. I see signals. They reach the trough. The bull plunged its muzzle into the water, gulping greedily. Riven loosened the rope, muscles finally easing. The yard quieted. She realized the men at the lane had drifted on, their curiosity sated or maybe edged away by Deacon Holt's presence. Say I took this deal, she said slowly. Say I let you graze your fancy steers on my scrub. What's the catch? You ride with my crew when they're on your land, he said. Her heart stopped. He must have read it on her face because his voice gentled. I've got good hands, but none of them know the bones of this place like you do. Where the sinkholes hide under brush. Where the spring overflows in the thaw. Where the ground turns to soup after 2 days' rain. You ride point when we're here. Riven took a step back from the trough without meaning to. The bull lifted its head, water dripping from its muzzle, and snorted at her retreat. I don't ride, she said. The words came out thin, ragged. Her mouth felt dry. Her hands, still wrapped in rope, suddenly remembered the slick feel of reins flying from them. Hoyt's shout cut off mid-curse, the sickening thud of body on rock. Deacon watched her carefully. You did once. I don't ride, she repeated. Not since, the word strangled. She forced it out. Not since Hoyt. Silence fell between them, broken only by the bull's watery chewing and a distant crow's caw. Deacon reached up and scratched the bull between the eyes, right where the fur swirled. If the last time you rode ended with you kissing the ground, I'd understand. But it wasn't you, was it? Riven's jaw clenched. Horse stumbled. Hoyt pulled it too hard on wet rock, Deacon said quietly. He was a good man, but he was showing off that day. Her head snapped up. You weren't there. One of my men was, he said. Word travels on the trail. The burn in her throat sharpened into anger. That what this is? You come to my yard. Tell me you know how my husband died better than I do. Then say you'll save me if I throw his saddle back on, like it never happened. To his credit, he didn't flinch. I came to your yard because I know how grief can turn into a noose you tighten yourself. I've worn one. I also know Pike is walking up your drive with a signed banknote in 2 weeks if nothing changes. I am offering you a way out, that doesn't end with you cooking in someone else's kitchen and your husband as Bran burned off these gates. The image hit her harder than his words. Hoyt is Bran, two crossed branches forming an 8 gouged out of the barn door. Replaced with Pike's ugly crooked P, her hands shook again, this time with fury instead of fear. I don't cook for men who aren't family, she said. Then don't, Deacon answered. Ride with them instead, Riven laughed once, a harsh bark. Easy for you to say from that pretty saddle. He glanced to where his horse waited at the hitching rail, an enormous bay gelding with a white blaze broad as a hand. The animal shifted, muscles rippling, as if it knew it was being discussed. Deacon's eyes came back to her. You think that horse scares me? He should, she muttered. He's big enough to cast his own shadow on the moon. Deacon's lips twitched. Come meet him. I'll pass. I thought you weren't scared of work, he said. I'm not. Then prove you're not scared of what comes with it. He tipped his head toward the gelding. Horses are part of cattle work, Riven. She wanted to tell him that a horse had been part of her husband's death too, and that the smell of sweat and leather still made bile rise in her throat. Instead, she handed him the rope, secured the gate, and wiped her palms on her trousers. I walk, she said. You ride. That's the line. Lines move, Deacon replied. Just like fences when Pike gets bored. That name again. It scraped along her nerves like a file. He started toward the hitching rail, slow enough that she could refuse by simply staying put. Riven cursed herself as her boots followed. The gelding loomed larger the closer she got. Up close, the horse wasn't merely big, he was immense. Broad chest, thick neck, legs like cedar trunks. His dark eyes took her in from hat brim to boots with an intelligence that made her uneasy. This is Monroe, Deacon said, patting the horse's shoulder. He's pulled wagons, carried me through mountain passes, and stood his ground in a hailstorm that sent 3 cowhands diving under the chuck wagon. Good for him, Riven said tightly. He's also the calmest animal on my spread, Deacon added. If you're going to remember what it feels like to sit a saddle, it should be on him. I said I'm not. Too big, isn't he? Deacon asked softly, eyes never leaving hers. The words froze her. Too big. She'd heard that phrase her whole life. Too big for the town's fancy dresses. Too big for a girl. Too big for the back of a church pew when she shifted. Too big for any man smaller than Hoyt to dance with without looking foolish. Story of my life, she said bitterly. Deacon's gaze didn't waver. Most folks see too big and mean too much for me to handle. They say it like you're the problem, aren't I? She snapped. No. He stepped closer, lowering his voice until it wrapped around her like a private oath. It means the world they built is too small. Her breath caught. He let the words hang there, then flicked a glance at Monroe's broad back. He's big because he's meant to carry real weight. Same as you. I am not a horse, she muttered. No, Deacon said. His mouth curved then, just the barest hint of wickedness at the edge of his professionalism. You're more stubborn, she almost smiled despite herself. Almost, Riven. His tone shifted, gentle but firm. Put your boot in the stirrup. Her heart thudded. Images flashed Hoyt's body on the ground, the sound her own scream had made. The way her knees had turned to water when they folded the flag at his brother's grave, 2 years before that. Grief upon grief, stacked like cordwood. She'd sworn never to climb higher than her own 2 feet again. No, she whispered. Deacon stepped close enough that she could feel the warmth of him along her arm, but he didn't touch. You trust that bull to follow your lead on the ground, he said. Trust this horse to hold you in the saddle. Trust yourself to stay there. You don't understand, she said. If I get up there and fall, then you fall from 6 feet up instead of 10, he said. You already know what rock feels like. It won't surprise you. Her stomach lurched. You're not helping. I'm not trying to make it easy, he said. I'm trying to make it worth it. The world seemed suddenly very small, just her, Deacon Holt, the giant bay gelding, and the echo of every taunt she'd heard since girlhood. Too big, too tall, Too much. What are you so terrified of, really? Deacon asked quietly. The fall? Or what happens if you don't fall this time? She glared at him. You like hearing yourself talk, don't you? He smiled, fleeting. Sometimes. Today I'm more interested in hearing you say yes. The horse shifted again, weight settling from one thick leg to the other. Riven stared at the saddle. It looked like a cliff face. Her palms started sweating. I can't, she whispered. You can, he said. You just don't want to remember that you can. His hand hovered near her elbow, offering balance without forcing it. Boot in the stirrup, Widow Calloway, he murmured. One breath, one step. That's all. The yard seemed to hold its breath with her. Riven lifted her boot. It felt like lifting the whole world. She hesitated, breath shaking, and that's when he leaned in, his mouth close enough to her ear that she could feel the warmth of his words. Too big, Deacon whispered, and she knew he was speaking to both the horse and the battered beliefs she carried. Too big for fear to keep on the ground. Just sit on it. The words rolled through her, startlingly intimate, like he reached down past callus and bone straight into the knot of dread in her belly. Just sit on it, not ride off into danger, not gallop, not chase cattle. Just sit. She could do that. Maybe. Riven shoved her foot into the stirrup before she could change her mind. Monroe stood rock still. She grabbed the saddle horn, fingers white, and pushed herself up. Her other boot scrabbled against leather, then found the far stirrup. For one suspended heartbeat, she hovered half on, half off. Then gravity decided for her. She landed in the seat with a jolt that drove air from her lungs. The world rose around her. The barn roof dropped below her eyeline. The yard spread out in a dizzying circle. She was up, her hands locked on the horn. She couldn't feel her legs. They were there, they had to be, but sensation had vanished from the knee down. Her heart thundered loud enough she was sure Monroe could hear it. Breathe, Deacon said. She sucked in air. It tasted like dust and fear and something sharper pride. You all right? He asked. No, she croaked. He chuckled softly, the sound warm. You're doing fine. I am several feet farther from the ground than God intended me to be, she muttered. God made you tall, Deacon said. Seems he always meant for you to see farther than most. She hated that the words soothed something raw in her. Lift your hands off the horn, he said. I'll die. I'll catch you. The certainty in his voice startled her more than the promise. You can't promise that, she said. I can, he answered. I don't break my word. She stared down at him. He met her gaze steadily, one hand resting easy on Monroe's neck, the other ready near her knee but not gripping. Slowly, finger by finger, Riven peeled her hands from the horn. The world didn't end. Her balance wobbled, then steadied as her thighs engaged without her permission. Muscle remembered what her mind had tried to forget. Years of riding as a girl, legs swinging bareback over half-broke colts, came back in a rush of instinct. She could feel the horse under her now, every breath, every tiny shift of weight. There, Deacon murmured. See? Too big for fear to throw. Don't say that, she hissed. You'll jinx it. He laughed again, this time loud enough to bounce off the barn. You superstitious Riven Calloway. I'm alive, she said. That's not superstition. That's statistics. He shook his head, still smiling. Gonna be hell keeping up with your mouth on a drive. The word drive snagged her breath. I'm not going on any drive, she said quickly. We'll start smaller, Deacon said. He took Monroe's lead rope and clicked his tongue. The horse stepped forward, slow and careful. Riven's insides lurched. No, one lap around the yard, he said. That's all. You can jump off any time you like. Don't tempt me, she muttered. He led Monroe in a wide circle. At first, every shift felt like the ground betraying her. Then, as her hips found the rhythm, something loosened. The motion wasn't jerking or wild. It was familiar. She hated that. You're doing it, Deacon said quietly. You're riding. Her throat burned. I'm not writing. I'm sitting and refusing to vomit. Progress, he said. They completed the circle. He halted Monroe near the hitching rail. You want down? Yes, yes. Get me off this beast. Get me back on solid ground. Get me somewhere Hoyga's ghost can't watch me betray the promise she'd made to never climb into a saddle again. No, she heard herself say. Deacon's eyes warmed. Good. A shout carried from the lane. Riven, you out there? She tensed. That voice she recognized too. Jeb Harrow, the town banker's clerk. Young, eager, and too easily impressed by men like Harlan Pike. Stay put, Deacon murmured to her, then raised his voice. Back here, Harrow. Jeb rounded the barn, cheeks flushed, hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. His gaze jumped immediately to Riven on the horse, surprise flickering across his face. Well, I'll be, he said. Ain't seen you ride since, since before. Riven's grip on the reins tightened. You bring news, Harrow? Deacon asked coolly. Jeb's eyes darted between them. Mr. Pike's in town, he said. At the bank. Mr. Larrabee sent me to fetch Widow Calloway. Says it's urgent, something about her account. Riven's stomach dropped. Deacon swore under his breath. Of course Pike's there. He said to come right away, Jeb added, then seemed to realize he'd overstepped in tone. Ma'am, sir. Riven swung her leg over the saddle too fast. Monroe shifted to keep her balanced, but she still hit the ground harder than she intended. Her knees protested. I'll hitch the wagon, she said, already moving. You'll do no such thing, Deacon said. You'll ride. She spun on him. I'm not riding into town. You want Pike seeing you roll up like a supplicant with a wagon he probably assumes he'll own by sundown. Deacon's voice sharpened. You ride in, high, looking like a woman who knows the worth of what she's bringing and isn't about to sell it for scrap. This isn't a parade, she said. It's war, he replied. And half of war is how you show up. Jeb shifted awkwardly. I can tell Mr. Larrabee you're on your way, ma'am. Riven's pulse hammered. Every instinct screamed to cling to the familiar rattle of wagon wheels and the safe distance of a bench. But another image rose. Pike's smug face when she signed away her land, because she'd been too afraid to climb higher than a wagon seat, too big for fear to keep on the ground. Saddle him, she said hoarsely. Deacon didn't smile. He just nodded once, sharp and satisfied. Already done. Minutes later, Riven was back on Monroe's back, this time with both boots secure and reins in hand instead of a lead rope dragging beside. Deacon mounted his own sorrel mare, swinging into the saddle with the easy grace of a man born there. Stay at my shoulder, he told her as they headed out. Let them look at you first. I'll be the shadow behind you. You're the one with the money, she said. And you're the one with the land, he replied. Today, that matters more. They rode down the dusty lane, neighbors pausing at fences, eyes widening at the sight of Riven Calloway tall in the saddle again. She kept her gaze fixed ahead, refusing to acknowledge the whispers. Douglas from the feed store tipped his hat. Old Mrs. Priam shaded her eyes, mouth slack. Someone let out a low whistle before being shushed. You seeing this? A voice muttered from a porch. Giant widow's back on a horse. Riven gritted her teeth. The words stung less than they once had. Maybe it was the height. The world looked different from up here, smaller somehow. Head high, Deacon murmured from behind her. You're not walking into a gallows. You're walking into a negotiation. Feels the same, she said. Difference is, you can walk back out of this one, he replied. Main Street of Dry Creek wasn't much a string of false-fronted buildings, a livery, a general store, the inevitable saloon with its bat-wing doors swinging in the faint breeze, and the brick box of the bank squatting like an overeager toad near the center. Riven reined Monroe in front of the bank. Her throat felt tight again. Deacon dismounted first, tying his mare and then holding Monroe's bridle while she swung down. Her boots hit the wooden walk with a thud. You ready? He asked. No, she said. Let's go. Inside, the bank smelled of ink, old coin, and polished wood. A fan turned lazily overhead. Mr. Larrabee, the bank manager, looked up from his tall desk, eyes widening briefly at the sight of Deacon and Riven together before smoothing into professional neutrality. "Widow Calloway," he said. Mr. Holt, Harlan Pike already had a chair. Of course he did. He lounged near Larrabee's desk, hat on his knee, boots crossed at the ankle. Thick in the middle, with a face that always looked like it had just smelled something unpleasant, Pike nonetheless carried himself with the easy entitlement of a man used to owning rooms. "Riven," he said, as if they were old friends. "Good of you to come so quick." Her hands curled into fists at her sides. "I came because Mr. Larrabee sent for me." "At my request," Pike said smoothly. "Bank and we've got mutual interests where your place is concerned." "My place," she said coldly, "is mine." Pike's eyes flicked to Deacon. "You bring a chaperone?" "I bring my guarantor," she said, before Deacon could answer. Larrabee cleared his throat. Now, no need for such language. "We're all friends here." Deacon's tone was mild, but steel threaded his words. "I don't count myself friend to any man salivating over a widow's overdue note." Larrabee's color went up. Pike's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Holt," the banker said quickly, "I hadn't realized you were involved." "I am," Deacon said. "I've come to settle Mrs. Calloway's arrears and arrange a new term with my name as guarantor." Riven's chest tightened at the sound of Mrs. Hoyt's name still sat in that title like a stone. Pike laughed, low and ugly. "You think you can just waltz in here, Holt, throw money around, and push me off a deal that's been brewing for months?" "Yes," Deacon said simply. Riven hid a flash of satisfaction. Larrabee flapped his hands like a nervous hen. "Now, Harlan, we haven't signed anything yet. Your offer was contingent on the note being called, and we haven't called it." "Yet," Pike said pointedly. Riven's stomach churned. "You are going to call it without talking to me." Larrabee dabbed at his forehead with a handkerchief. "Widow Calloway, you have to understand, the bank has obligations. 2 missed payments are now covered," Deacon cut in. He pulled a folded packet from his vest and laid it on the desk. "Full payment on arrears, plus 6 months advanced." Larrabee blinked. 6, and, Deacon continued, "I will sign as guarantor on the remainder." Silence fell heavily. Pike surged to his feet. "You can't do that." "I just did," Deacon said. "You'll regret it," Pike snarled. "That spring should have been mine 5 years ago. Hoyt was a fool holding on to scrub he couldn't afford, and she's a bigger fool for trying to do the same." Riven's vision went red at the edges. "Say one more word about my husband, and you'll be picking your teeth out of the floorboards." Pike's mouth curled. "Careful, Giant. Folks might start to think you're dangerous." "I already do," Deacon said quietly. The simple statement landed between them like a thrown knife. Riven felt its edge and warmth at once. Larrabee fussed with the papers, eager to redirect. "If we can all just sit Mrs. Calloway, Mr. Holt, we'll need your signatures. Mr. Pike, I'm sure we can find other opportunities for your investment." Pike's eyes burned. "This isn't over," he said. "For once," Riven replied. "You're right." They signed. Ink scratched, seals pressed. With every stroke of the pen, Riven felt something loosen in her chest, a rope she'd been tightening around her own neck since Hoyt's death. When it was done, Larrabee shook their hands with oily gratitude. "Pleasure doing business, as always, Mr. Holt. Widow Calloway, I trust this arrangement will give you some breathing room." "Breathing room's all well and good," Riven said. "I'd prefer room to stand." "You'll have that," Deacon said as they stepped back onto the street. "As long as you're willing to stand in the stirrups sometimes." She groaned. "You don't quit." "Not when something's worth the trouble," he replied. They mounted up again. Riven swung into Monroe's saddle with marginally more grace this time. Her muscles protested, but the panic wasn't as sharp. As they rode out of town, Deacon's mood seemed lighter. "You did well in there." "I nearly punched Pike," she said. "And I'd have enjoyed watching it," he said. "But you did better. You let him see you weren't begging." She shrugged, embarrassed. "I had you at my back. Today," he said. "Won't always be the case." A chill slid down her spine at the thought of facing Pike without Deacon's calm presence beside her. "You planning to vanish on me, Holt?" "Planning to put you in a position where you don't need me," he said. They crested the last low rise before her ranch when a dust cloud on the horizon caught Deacon's eye. He straightened in the saddle. "Riders," he said. "A lot of them." Riven squinted. "Stampede." "Not yet," he said. "But it could be if those steers aren't handled right. That'll be my afternoon delivery. I sent word they'd be holding them on your north range to save time." "You what?" she demanded. "Consider it your first day as partner," he said. "We need to get down there." Her gut clenched. "On horseback? Across that gully?" "Unless you plan to sprout wings," Deacon said, already nudging his mare into a lope. Monroe tossed his head, eager to follow. Riven tightened her grip on the reins, heart thudding. Too big for fear to keep on the ground. She gritted her teeth. "Fine," she muttered to the horse. "But if I die, I'm haunting him, not you." They pounded across the pasture, the wind pulling at Riven's braid, the ground vibrating under Monroe's heavy strides. As they topped the last rise before the north pasture, the full sight of the incoming herd hit her. Dozens of steers, horns flashing, bodies pressing in a restless, snorting river of beef. Deacon's men rode the edges, whooping and whistling, trying to funnel the animals toward the temporary corral they'd set up near her spring. The problem was obvious at once. The far section of fence, newly built, hastily hammered, was leaning badly. One more heavy shove from the herd, and it would go. Beyond it yawned the gully, dry now but steep-sided and littered with boulders. A death trap for any animal or rider who went over. "Damn," Deacon breathed. That post wasn't set right. As if hearing him, one of the lead steers bawled and surged toward the weak spot. The rest bunched behind, pressure building. And right there, at the edge of the gully, Riven saw a small figure. A boy, skinny, maybe 10 at most, clutching a stick, and yelling at the steers as if his scrawny frame could hold them back. "Tobin!" Riven shouted. Her neighbor's youngest. The fool child had been underfoot in her place all spring. The wind snatched her voice. The boy didn't turn. Deacon's curse ripped through the air. "If that fence gives, those steers'll take him with it," Riven finished, ice filling her veins. He wheeled his mare. "I'll swing wide, try to turn the lead. You." Riven didn't wait for instructions. Her whole life had been one long lesson in being too big, too much, too scared of the fall to climb. But that boy was smaller than every fear she'd ever carried. She dug her heels into Monroe's sides. The gelding lunged forward like a loosed cannonball, straight down the slope toward the buckling fence and the roaring sea of horns. Behind her, she heard Deacon shout her name. The sound was swallowed by the thunder of hooves as Riven Calloway charged straight toward the breaking point. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. Riven flattened herself over Monroe's neck as the gelding thundered downhill. The world narrowed to the hammer of hooves, the roar of steers, and the small, terrified shape of Tobin Harrow, planted by the leaning fence at the edge of the gully. "Move, Tobin!" she screamed. The wind shredded her voice. The boy hunched his skinny shoulders, jabbing his stick at the oncoming steers, as if he could hold back a river with a twig. A horn slammed into the boards. Wood shrieked. The whole section of fence sagged outward toward the drop where, last spring, she'd watched a ranch hand's horse slide and tumble. That memory rose, sharp and sickening, the snap of timber, the thud that didn't get back up. Not again. Riven drove her heels into Monroe. The big gelding surged, eating the last stretch of slope in a handful of strides. Steers bawled and scattered, horns tossing, eyes rolling white. Riven hauled the left rein, angling Monroe between the front rank and the weakest part of the fence. Bodies slammed against her leg, hot hide scraping her boot, a horn glancing off her stirrup. Fear clawed up her spine, replaying another fall, another yell cut short. She shoved it down. "Come on, big man," she muttered into Monroe's mane. "Be a wall." She drove the gelding's shoulder into the lead steer. Monroe hit like a battering ram. The steer bellowed, hooves skidding as its momentum diverted just enough. "Tobin!" Riven roared. "Back from the edge." "Now!" The boy's head jerked up. For a heartbeat, he froze, torn between fear of the herd and fear of disappointing the adults he idolized. Riven let every inch of ranch boss steal into her voice. "That's an order." Something in the tone broke him loose. Tobin stumbled backward, tripping over his own boots as he scrambled away from the gap. The weak post groaned. Riven felt the give more than heard it. Years of walking fence lines had trained her bones to recognize that particular wrenching shift, the instant between damaged and doomed. "Deacon!" she shouted. From the far flank, she saw him spur his mare, cutting a dangerous diagonal across the herd. "Push 'em right." His voice cracked like a whip. "Rope those leaders. Keep 'em off that break." His men moved instantly. Ropes whistled. Loops snapped over horns. Riders leaned back. Horses braced, diverting the herd's press. The fence bowed outward another inch. Riven slammed Monroe forward that last yard, planting his bulk between the steers and the weakening post. The gelding stopped dead, front hooves skidding, chest braced against the tide. Steers pressed in, flanks sliding against his shoulder, horns scraping leather and boot. "Too big," Riven gasped through clenched teeth. "Too big to be shoved." "Hold." A horn snagged the lowest board. The rail snapped with a vicious crack, the broken piece whipping back hard enough to smack her thigh and Monroe's leg in the same vicious blow. Monroe squealed and reared a fraction. For one terrible instant, Riven felt them both tilt toward the gully, the ground vanishing from beneath them, her body weight going the wrong way. The taste of Hoyt's fall flooded her mouth. No. She dropped the reins and threw herself forward, flattening along Monroe's neck, fingers locking into his mane. "Down," she gasped. "Down, boy." The gelding teetered, massive body wavering. Then he sucked in a breath like a bellows and slammed his front hooves down. They hit packed earth an inch from the crumbling lip. Dirt sloughed away, rattling into the gully below. The top board tore free, flying over the edge and disappearing. But the steers didn't follow. Pinned by Monroe and turned by Deacon's men, the herd's momentum finally broke. The crush slackened, animals milling and snorting instead of driving. Riven stayed glued to the horse's neck until the roar around her softened from disaster to ordinary racket. Only then did she push herself upright, lungs burning. "You all right there, giant?" Deacon's voice came from her right, breathless but steady. She forced her knees to stop shaking. "Define all right." He rode up alongside, gray eyes scanning her from hat brim to boot, then dropping to Monroe's legs. A shallow cut oozed along the gelding's cannon bone where the snapped rail had struck. "You bleeding anywhere I can't see?" he asked. "Not yet," she said. "Ask me tomorrow." His mouth twitched. "That was a damn fool move. Yell at me after we count the heads," she said. "The boy?" Deacon turned his mare, following her gaze. Tobin sat on a rock well away from the broken fence, arms locked around his knees, face pale but intact. "Breathing," Deacon said. "By my count, that makes you smarter than half the men I've hired." Riven's shoulders sagged with relief, strong enough to make her dizzy. The rest of the afternoon blurred into ordered frenzy. They shored up the gap with spare boards, pushed the herd farther from the gully, and finally settled the steers in a safer patch near her spring. Through it all, Riven rode. Silence stretched between them, not empty, but full of things unsaid. "I'm sorry," she said. "Me too," he answered. "For a long while, I tried to run fast enough that the river couldn't catch me. Bought land, hired men, signed contracts. Figured if I stacked enough work between me and that day, maybe it'd stop chewing on my heels. Riven huffed a bitter breath. Hoyt's brother died in the war. Hoyt nailed his folded flag over our mantle. Said it meant we were obligated to live big enough for two. When he died, her throat tightened. I felt like I'd used up my share of men. Like the world was telling me I'd asked for too much. Too big. Deacon's gaze sharpened. You think wanting a partner who saw you as you are was wanting too much? Half the town does, she said. They look at me and see trouble. Too tall for polite dances. Too strong for a wife. Too much for any man shorter than me to stand beside without feeling small. Then that's their poverty, Deacon said. Not yours, she snorted. Easy for a rich man to say. You think money fixes that kind of fear? He asked. It doesn't. It just gives cowards nicer boots to run in. Her lips twitched despite herself. When I told you to just sit on Monroe, he went on, I meant more than the horse. You've been standing on the ground a long time, telling yourself that's where you belong, because one fall hurt too much. Standing kept me alive, she said. Maybe, he allowed. But today proved something, Riven. Fear isn't the only thing that lives in you. She looked away, blinking hard. You talk too pretty for a cattleman. You kept my steers and a boy alive, he replied. I'm allowed a few fancy words. A knock on the door broke the moment. One of Deacon's hands stuck his head in. Boss, rider coming up the lane. Deacon was on his feet at once. Friend or problem? Looks like Harrow, sir. The elder. Riven's stomach tightened. Let him in. Jeb Harrow arrived dust-covered and wild-eyed. Glasses askew, hat crushed in his hands. Widow Calloway, he blurted. Mr. Holt, they said someone said Tobin was near killed. He's fine, Riven cut in. Shaken, not broken. Pa? Tobin's voice piped from behind her, the boy hovering in the doorway to the back room. Jeb strode across the floor and hauled his son into his arms, squeezing hard enough to make the boy squeak. Don't you ever, Jeb choked, ever stand that close to that gully again. Yes, sir, Tobin muffled into his shirt. Once the first flood of fear passed, Jeb turned to Riven and Deacon. Tell me what happened. All of it. They kept it simple, herd pressed, fence-giving, Riven and Monroe holding the line, Deacon turning the front, Tobin getting out by a hair. Jeb's face went gray. I send him out for air and he finds a stampede. He's got heart, Riven said. Now he needs sense to go with it. Deacon set the little wedge of wood on the table. There's more. We found this in the post hole. And pry marks on the rim, Jeb stared. You telling me someone did that on purpose? Looks that way, Deacon said. Post would have held another season if it hadn't been helped loose. Jeb's gaze snapped to Riven. Pike? Who else profits if my north fence fails and my note gets called? She said. I've carried his ledgers, Jeb said, voice shaking now with anger instead of fear. I know how he thinks. Numbers first, then dirt. People last. If at all. We can't prove he ordered this, Deacon cautioned. He's too careful to leave his name on anything that dirty. But word about that wedge? It'll travel. Jeb squared his shoulders. I'll help it along. Folks may take his loans, but they love their boys more. They hear Harlan Pike nearly got mine killed to snatch your spring. They'll think twice before calling him friend. Be careful, Riven said. He pushes when he feels cornered. So do I, Jeb replied. He squeezed Tobin's shoulder. You owe Miss Riven and Mr. Holt thanks, boy. Tobin nodded vigorously. Thank you, ma'am, sir. Riven ruffled his hair, something maternal and unfamiliar tugging at her chest. You pay me back by living long enough to make smarter choices. After they left, the house felt oddly quiet. Deacon lingered in the doorway, watching the dust of their departure settle. You know what changed today? He asked. My fence broke and my bones didn't, she said. Your story broke, he corrected. The one where you re-alone and the only thing you re-good for is surviving what men leave behind. She bristled. I didn't ask to be anyone's story. We don't get to choose that part, he said. Only what we do when folks start telling it. By dawn, the camp was already moving. Deacon's men saddled horses, shouldered posthole diggers, and headed for the north line. Riven joined them, Monroe's broad back feeling less like a precipice and more like height. "We're setting this deep," Deacon said, shoveling out a new hole. "No more easy posts for cowards to pry at." "Wire too," Riven said. "Harder to kick out than boards." "Wire it is," he agreed. All morning they dug, set, tamped. The metallic twang of stretched wire rang across the pasture like a new kind of song. Local boys drifted in to help when they heard what had happened. Boys Riven had known since they were knee-high. Boys whose parents murmured thank yous when they thought she wasn't listening. Near midday, a small dust cloud rose on the horizon. Pike. He rode with two men, both broad, both wearing square-toed boots. They came at an easy lope, as if out for a lazy look at the scenery. Riven swallowed, then rode to meet them, stopping just inside her new fence. Deacon eased Monroe aside and took up position one step behind her shoulder. "Afternoon, Riven," Pike drawled, reining in. "Busy, I see. Keeping cattle out of death holes tends to occupy a body," she replied. His gaze slid over the new posts, the gleaming wire, the men working. "Looks expensive. Partnership has its benefits," Deacon said mildly. Pike's eyes hardened. "You always move this fast when you smell opportunity, Holt." "I move this fast when someone tampers with my investment," Deacon said. "Fence shouldn't have failed the way it did." "Old wood," Pike said with a shrug. "Fresh cut," Riven corrected. "I sank those posts myself. You accusing me of something?" Pike's voice lost its lazy lilt. "I'm saying," Deacon replied, "if I find proof that someone pried on that post and nearly sent a herd and a boy into that gully, I'll be writing to the sheriff." One of Pike's men shifted in his saddle. Pike's eyes flicked to him, then back. "Sheriff works for the county," Pike said. "And the county runs on men who bring money." "Men like me." Riven leaned her forearms on the top wire, meeting his gaze without flinching. "County also runs on men who don't like their sons turned into hoofprints. Tobin Harrow was on that fence. Pike, you might want to think about how his pa feels right now." A flash of annoyance crossed his face before he smoothed it away. "Boys wander, fences break. That's ranchin'. Not when wedges and crowbars get involved," Deacon said. The air went tight. Pike smiled thinly. "You two look mighty sure of yourselves. A widow with a reputation for trouble and a railman with more debt than sense." "I paid my arrears yesterday," Riven said. "Thanks to my partner. The bank's ledger says I'm solid." "For now," Pike said. "But water flows downhill. So does power." "Funny thing about water," Deacon said. "It carves canyons out of rock. Takes time, but it wins." Pike's gaze slid over Riven again, lingering a fraction too long. "You hiding behind Holt, Giant?" "No," she said. "I'm standing beside him." "There's a difference." Something in her tone made him look away first. "Enjoy your little fence raising," he sneered. "This isn't over. You keep saying that," she replied, starting to sound like a man who's run out of new words. A ripple of subdued laughter drifted from Deacon's men. Pike's jaw clenched. "Come on," he snapped to his riders. They wheeled their horses and kicked up dust on the way out. Riven watched them go until they were small shapes against the sky. Only then did she let out the breath she'd been holding. "My whole life," she said quietly, "men like that have been the horizon, always there, always looming." "They shrink when you get closer," Deacon said. "Or when you climb higher." He nodded toward Monroe. "World looks different from a saddle, doesn't it?" "Too big," she said automatically.